Go to the wild Atlantic edges of Ireland, Connemara, County Clare, the far west, and look at the faces. Not the red-haired, freckled faces from the postcards. The other faces. Jet black hair, pale skin that barely sees the sun yet never burns, eyes that are startlingly blue or deep hazel, set against features that look like they belong on the Mediterranean coast rather than a rain-soaked Irish village. These people have always been in Ireland, and for generations nobody could explain them. They were called the Black Irish, and those two words hide one of the most misunderstood mysteries in the whole human story. Let's start with the version everyone knows. The year is 1588. The Spanish Armada, the most powerful fleet ever assembled, sails to invade England and fails. Storms scatter it across the North Atlantic, and 26 ships wreck on the jagged coast of Western Ireland. And the legend writes itself. Dark-eyed, olive-skinned Spanish sailors crawl ashore, shelter with Irish families, marry, and father the dark-featured people you still see in Connemara and Donegal today. It's a beautiful story. It's also completely false. Here's what the record shows. Of the roughly 6,000 Spanish sailors wrecked on the coast, most never made it ashore alive, drowning in the surf in full armour. Those who did fared little better. At Stradog Strand in County Sligo, over 1,100 men washed up, and a surviving Spanish officer described watching his comrades robbed and killed by locals who wanted their valuables, not their company. The English governor ordered any Spaniard found alive to be executed on the spot, and one English commander boasted of getting rid of more than 300 survivors personally. Historians estimate no more than a few hundred survivors spent any real time on Irish soil, and almost none stayed. There are no Spanish surnames in Irish birth records from the period, and no genetic signal from it. The geneticist Dan Bradley of Trinity College Dublin put it flatly: the Spanish Armada theory is a myth. So if it wasn't the Spanish, what made the Black Irish dark? We have to go back much further. Around 10,000 BC, the Ice Age retreats and Ireland becomes habitable, and the first arrivals are tall hunter-gatherer nomads who look nothing like the modern stereotype: dark hair and dark skin paired with pale eyes. Then scientists at Trinity College sequenced Ireland's first ancient genomes. One belonged to a woman buried near Belfast about 5,000 years ago, the Ballynahatty woman. She had black hair, brown eyes, and her closest modern relatives weren't Irish at all, but the Basques and Sardinians. She descended from Stone Age farmers who left the Near East around 6,000 years ago, spread west across Europe, and reached Ireland carrying agriculture, megalithic tomb building, and, crucially, their dark pigmentation. Around 2500 BC came another wave from the eastern steppe in what is now Ukraine and southern Russia. These Yamnaya-related peoples brought cattle, metal, the Proto-Celtic languages that became Irish, lighter features, and the genetic marker R1b. Today, Ireland has the highest concentration of R1b on Earth, over 80% of Irish men. And the second highest in the world isn't Britain or France, it's the Basque country and the wider Iberian Peninsula. That's the real Irish-Spanish connection. Not sailors in 1588, but a blood bond forged 4,000 years ago when Bronze Age seafarers navigated the Atlantic coast from Portugal to Ireland. Ireland was never sealed off after that. The Vikings arrived in 795 and settled. The Normans came in 1169, bringing surnames like Fitzgerald and Burke, and English colonization from the 1500s brought wave after wave more. But through all of it, in the isolated western valleys, the oldest genetics simply persisted. That's why the Black Irish cluster in the west, the region always most resistant to outside settlement. The Atlantic coast held the oldest blood. Now here's the turn almost nobody talks about. The term Black Irish didn't come from Ireland at all. It was born in America, and it was born in hatred. Professor Mary Burke of the University of Connecticut traced it. The phrase first appears in American records in the 1830s and explodes in the 1840s. And that timing is no accident, because that's the decade of the Great Famine. Between 1845 and 1852, the potato blight killed 1 million people and drove 2 million more abroad, most to the United States. They arrived starving, Catholic in a Protestant society, and they were not welcome. The Know Nothing movement declared them racially inferior, and signs reading "No Irish Need Apply" went up in shop windows. In that atmosphere, Black Irish became a weapon, used to separate the desperate new famine immigrants from the earlier, more assimilated Irish Americans. It implied they weren't quite white, a tool to keep them in the tenements and mark them as other. Some Irish Americans even turned it the other way, using it to explain away mixed ancestry in families trying to pass in white society. And then the insult transformed. A phrase invented by people who despised Irish immigrants became, over time, a badge of pride, worn by millions who knew they didn't fit the freckled ginger stereotype. F. Scott Fitzgerald gave it a brooding romance. Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan the Barbarian, wrote Black Irish characters as dark and wild-spirited. The mythology took on a life of its own, and it buried the truth. So what does the genetics actually say? The dark features of the Black Irish aren't an anomaly in the Irish story. They are the story, the survival of the oldest genetic threads on the island, stretching back before agriculture and metalworking to the earliest people who ever walked Irish soil. There's a reason those features cluster in Galway, Clare, Mayo, and Connemara. When Cromwell gave dispossessed Irish Catholics the choice to hell or to Connaught, he exiled them to the most barren, remote corner of the island, and paradoxically, that exile preserved the oldest Irish genetics in amber. Isolated further, their ancient features persisted. And today, on the Aran Islands, you can see faces that could have stepped out of a Neolithic village 5,000 years ago. Faces on this island since before the pyramids. Here's what strikes me most. For generations, dark-featured Irish people were told their darkness was foreign, that it made them less purely Irish. The Armada story implied it. The American slur was designed to enforce it. And the truth is the exact opposite. The red hair that became the Irish stereotype is largely Viking, brought by raiders 1100 years ago. Much of the fair skin came with Bronze Age steppe migrants only 4,000 years ago. But the jet black hair, the dark eyes, the complexion that tans instead of burns, that reaches back through the oldest inheritance on the island. If someone in your family was called Black Irish, you're not carrying foreign blood, you're carrying the oldest blood in Ireland. In a literal genetic sense, you may be the most original Irish person in the room. The Black Irish were never a mystery descended from a shipwreck. They're a mystery descended from time itself, and now you know. If this story moved you, share it with someone who has dark Irish features and has always wondered why. And if you have your own Black Irish family story, tell us in the comments. Every one of those stories is a thread connecting us to the oldest humans who ever called Ireland home.